This week was July 4th in Highland Park, Illinois. Of course, it was July 4th everywhere. But July 4th in Highland Park, Illinois is different from every other July 4th that I know of. Because last year on July 4th, the city was struck with tragedy. There was a shooter ensconced on a roof with a weapon of mass destruction. In less than 2 minutes, there were 83 shots fired. 7 people ultimately were killed, 48 were wounded. The casualties ranged in age from age 8 to age 88. 2 Mexican national citizens were killed. There were 2 Jewish victims as well. Highland Park is known as being a very Jewish suburb. Of course, the Highland Park Parade also draws from Highwood, which is known for a large immigrant population, first of Italians and now also of Latinos. And so when the shooting happened, and in the aftermath of the shooting, one of the fears that was articulated and that was felt was that this was not an accident, that it was this suburb where this happened. Was it a targeting of immigrants? Was it a targeting of Jews? Was it a targeting of the city of Highland Park, which had worked hard to ban assault weapons in the city and ultimately in the state? They had a case go all the way to the Supreme Court asking, can a city ban assault weapons? And it was upheld. But for those who insist that there are no limits to the Second Amendment, this might be a cause for violence. We did not know. It seems most likely, and I have not read every single article on the subject because frankly, I can't and I don't want to. Most likely the motivation was an alienated kid who grew up in Highland Park, who was lashing out at the community that he knew in a place that he knew. It wasn't anti-immigrant racism or gun rights fanaticism or anti-Semitism as a major factor. But it was understandable that Jews were nervous about the motivation behind this attack in the aftermath of the last few years. Remember, there have been shootings and other attacks at Jewish institutions. Remember Colleyville, Texas, the hostage-taking? There was a stabbing at a Hanukkah party in a rabbi's home in Monsey, New York. A shooting at a kosher grocery store in Jersey City, New Jersey. And synagogue shootings in Poway, California, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The Tree of Life shooting was less than 5 years ago. We've seen in surveys done by the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith that anti-Semitic attitudes have risen substantially, where in past years 5%, 10% of Americans evinced anti-Semitic attitudes as shown by the survey that's been done more or less the same for 60 years. Now that number was up to 20%. And that's disturbing. We know that there are triggers for anti-Semitism coming from both sides of the political aisle. The nativist and Christian nationalist right that sees the Jews as polluting the race and undermining American values, or restricting Christians in exercising their God-given right to dominate the country. But also on the progressive left, the universalist anti-colonial progressive left that sees Israel as the worst country in the world, worthy of more attention than anywhere else. Look at the United Nations Human Rights Commission that has more resolutions about Israel than any other country in the world, including China, North Korea, some of which actually sit on the UN Human Rights Council. I mean, if Syria is on the Human Rights Council, what's going on here? So we're getting it from both sides, and we get it more loudly than ever before. The boldness to say what you want on social media and to say it without repercussions in increasing numbers of platforms is off the charts from what it used to be. So maybe they always felt this way, but now they're saying it and finding other people who feel the same way. I had to laugh at a dialogue that took place on Twitter a couple of years ago. Elon Musk, who I don't think I need to introduce, Elon Musk tweeted, "When you're getting criticized from both the right and the left, you must be doing something right." And someone responded to that saying, "Show me you're Jewish without telling me you're Jewish. Show me you're not Jewish without telling me you're not Jewish." You see, someone who can say, "Oh, it's no problem getting criticized from Jews getting criticized from both sides are nervous in all directions." So Elon Musk showed that he wasn't Jewish by saying, yeah, it's a good idea. They get criticized by both sides. Jews know what it's like, and it's not a nice place to be. Now, if this were the only American Jewish narrative, rising anti-Semitism, incidents of violence, there would be thousands of Jews leaving this country for Canada, for Israel, for Australia, maybe even anywhere else. I mean, how did Yiddish-speaking Jews get to Buenos Aires and Mexico? They got there because they couldn't get in here, but they needed to go anywhere else than where they were. There's a wonderful poem about being a refugee by Warshan Shire, who fled from Somalia, I believe, some parts of Africa. And she says that you only leave home when the home is the mouth of a shark. And it's not tenable to stay, that the unknown is better than what you know. And Jewish refugees over centuries did that, but they're not doing that now. There must be another story to tell about American Judaism that isn't only these negative things. Fortunately, we have studies and surveys. In the Bible, actually, it tells Jews don't take a census, don't count everybody, because you're like counting God's blessings. There'd be people who would refuse to talk about how many grandkids they have because they'd tempt the evil eye. We're not afraid of that anymore. We count each other all the time. And we want to know how many Jews there are, and what are they doing, and what do they live like. So we do surveys periodically. And in 2020, the Pew Research Center conducted another study. They did a major groundbreaking one in 2013. They did a follow-up study in 2020 to give us a snapshot of what the American Jewish experience is like as we go into the 2020s. Now, some of the headlines you saw were discussing anti-Semitism and how vulnerable Jews felt, and how many of them documented an experience of having anti-Semitic interaction, whether it was verbal or property damage or worse. But they also talked about conflicts within the community, and there were a lot of good news stories to be found if you look at some of the demographics and the emotional responses that Jews had to their setting in America. So let me give you some of the good news coming out of Jews in America in 2023. We're used to hearing the Jews are vanishing. There was a famous headline in a magazine called Look magazine in the 1960s. The headline was "The Vanishing American Jew," talking about how intermarriage rates and assimilation will wipe out Jews in a generation. Well, we're 60 years, more or less, after that Look magazine cover, and there is no Look magazine anymore, but there are still Jews. We have not vanished, and we are not vanishing. In fact, the numbers of this survey suggest our numbers are rising, not going down. This study showed that, based on their estimates, there are about 5.8 million Jewish adults in America, and about 1.8 million children in a household with at least one Jewish adult, who are being raised some kind of Jewish. It could be being Jewish and something else, or Jewish culturally, or religiously Jewish. They might have one Jewish parent, they might have two Jewish parents. But at a minimum, there are 1.8 million kids in a household where they have one Jewish adult and they're being raised some kind of Jewish. So that adds up to over 7.5 million Jews in America. That would be 2.4% of the US population. That's not nothing. We are very rooted in America. We talked about the immigrant experience. It was part of our Shabbat service tonight. We heard that beautiful rendition of Far From the Home I Love, telling the immigrant story from Fiddler on the Roof. But it turns out that that's not the American Jewish story today. We're very rooted in America. 90% of American Jews were born in the US. And 2/3, 68% of them, both of their parents were born in the US. So that's very rooted. But if you think about yourself and the people you know, well, maybe it does ring a bell that, well, my parents were born here and I was born here. Now, in some cases, you're part of that 32% where one of your parents was born out of the country. But again, 90% of American Jews are native born, and 68% of them are native bred, going back a generation. That's very rooted. And the sense of comfort you have of having been here for multiple generations, you can't replace. Jews in America are well educated. We've translated that traditional Jewish focus on learning, that, by the way, was restricted to men, not to women. We've expanded it to women, and we've opened it to secular education. 58% of American Jews who are adults have an undergraduate college degree or higher, postgraduate degree. 58% have a college degree. Comparing that to the general US population, 29% of the general population has a college degree, which, by the way, just as a political aside, is why college debt forgiveness is not a universal slam dunk. When only 29% of the general population has a college degree, they don't feel like college debt forgiveness is a universal giveaway. But with Jews, 58% of whom have college degrees, that seems a more natural fit. As a whole, American Jews are doing pretty well financially, and it's okay to say it out loud. We don't have to whisper about that issue anymore. 23%, almost a quarter of American Jews, report earning over $200,000 a year. About half of American Jews earn over $100,000 a year. So, again, that's very, very high performing. Over half of American Jews earning $100,000 a year. Now, I will also note that about 1/5 of American Jews, about 20%, earn less than $50,000. That includes retirees, fixed income. So not everybody is doing, swimmingly well. It's not the anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. But by and large, as a population, we're doing reasonably well, especially when you compare us to the general American population. What percent would you guess of the general American population earns over $200,000? 4%. Right? Remember, 23% of American Jews are earning that, only 4%. Remember the college education? That pays off. What percent of Americans in general earn over $100,000? So $100,000 and up. Again, for Jews, it was about 50%. For the general population, 20%. 1/5 compared to half. What proportion of the US population earns under $50,000 a year? For American Jews, it was about 1/5. For the general population, 3/5, 60% earns $50,000 a year or less. So demographically, as a community, if you lump it all together, American Jews are doing pretty well. The worst of times, the best of times. We are also very integrated into the American power structure. Our children go to elite colleges. We are very well represented in law firms and in the finance industry and in the entertainment industry, of course. Even in politics, 6% of the House of Representatives identify as Jewish, 8% of the Senate identifies as Jewish. Remember, we're only 2.4% of the population. That's overrepresentation. And of course, we have a Jewish second gentleman. The spouse of the vice president is Douglas Emhoff, who married well and is now in the halls of power. And don't forget, many of the Biden grandchildren also married Jewish people. I remember not that long ago when Chelsea Clinton married a Jewish man, it was big news. Now, it's not even big news. There's an official US envoy to deal with anti-Semitism and on and on. We have voices in the halls of power. And one more piece of good news, intermarriage rates are staying high. Now you might say, how is that good news? Well, it's good news for a few reasons. One is the outside population is happy to marry Jews. They're not rejecting Jews as possible marriage partners. It shows that Jews are integrated into the surrounding culture and society. We're not afraid to open our doors and our hearts to people of other backgrounds. And we also know that more people in the world have Jews in their family. And so what their reaction to anti-Semitism, well, now it's not an abstract question. It's my grandkids. It's my daughter-in-law that is affected by this issue. It is not simply those people over there. Even more better news on this front is that we've had more open Jewish communities in the last 20 years than we did in the previous 20 years. Some of you may remember when Humanistic Judaism started in the 1960s and in the early 70s, Rabbi Dan Friedman in Chicago, Rabbi Sherwin Wine in Detroit were some of the only rabbis who were willing to officiate at intermarriage ceremonies. And they would do 7, 8, 10 in a weekend because they were the only ones who would do it. And they were serving these people, they were opening doors to Jewish communities. Their congregations welcomed them, no matter which parent was Jewish, to raise their kids as some Jewish connection. But most of the Jewish world was rejectionist and said no. They put their head in the sand and their hands over their eyes and slammed the door shut. And so, unsurprisingly, very small numbers of intermarrying Jews would raise their kids as Jewish. Remember that number? One Jewish adult in the house and raising. But if you were the one Jewish adult in the house and they told you to get lost and what a terrible thing you were doing, and you're finishing Hitler's work by marrying that wonderful person, well, why would you want to be a part of that community? On the other hand, now that we have more rabbis, I'm a lot less busy. I do a lot fewer weddings, and I'm happy for that. My college fund, not so happy for that, but my schedule is happy for that, and my heart is happy for that, because that means there are more rabbis willing to welcome people into the Jewish family, broadly considered, and whose congregations are open to those people joining and being part of a Jewish community. And so, surprise, surprise, the more welcoming response has led to more intermarried couples and families raising their kids with some kind of Jewish experience. More bees with honey. Works with a lot of things. We are retaining more Jews who intermarry. We're retaining more of their children to have some positive Jewish connection. And you see how the Jewish numbers are going up? That's one of the reasons why. Intermarriage is going to happen in a free society. And if that's the case, then the question is, what do you do with those intermarried couples? Do you tell them get lost? Do you say oy vey? Or do you respond with mazel tov and welcome? And the more mazel tov, the better results. So it is not all bad in the American Jewish experience, even if we only hear the bad news. Yes, there is still inter-Jewish communal conflict between Orthodox Jews and more liberal Jews. Just this last week, I read about a case of a kosher bakery in New Jersey that refused to bake rainbow-colored cupcakes for a Pride Month celebration that was ordered by a conservative rabbi. So the conservative rabbi wanted kosher cupcakes for their Pride celebration. She ordered it from a kosher bakery run by an Orthodox Jew, and he said no. Of course, if we believe the Supreme Court, he's within his rights to do that, right? He's exercising his religious freedom as a creative artist who makes cupcakes. Well, what do we do about that? He's gotten a lot of publicity. And every journalist that goes to speak to me says, ugh, this again? I don't want to hear about it. Everybody knows the name of his bakery. And in the end, the conservative rabbi was able to find another kosher bakery that would make her cupcakes. But it's a case of communal conflict. It's just one example. There are plenty of them out there. So those conflicts are still there. And yes, of course, there are Jewish disagreements over Israel and what's happening in Israel, what Israel's doing, and what's happening to Israel. You're never going to get consensus, and we never had it, and we never will. There is the ongoing hand-wringing over the future of the Jews and what's going to happen to the Jews. There was a scholar, a historian named Simon Rabinovich. In the 1940s, he coined a term, the ever-dying people. Every Jewish generation is convinced that they are going to be the last. Every generation. And guess what happens? They're not. He said that in the 1940s. Here we are, 80 years later, and we still have the ever-dying people lamenting and woe and woe. But here we are. We're still here. The good news is, there's more ways than ever to become a rabbi. In fact, there are women fully included in Jewish public life and leadership in ways they weren't even 50 years ago. The first American ordained woman rabbi was in 1972. There was one ordained in Europe in the 1930s during the Holocaust that people forgot about. But it really began as an ongoing phenomenon in 1972. It's only 50 years ago. And now you have women being ordained in a rabbi equivalent role even in the modern Orthodox world. That's progress. When all Jews are able to participate in most Judaisms as leaders, as creators, as teachers, that's progress. That's good news. Today, we have more opportunities for Jewish learning and celebration and community than ever before, in each community and online and free. You can take Jewish classes all over the spectrum, from humanist to ultra-Orthodox, online, for free, or for paying something to support the institution. We don't object if you want to chip in a little bit. But you can get access to, there's no barriers anymore. It's open and available. You can connect to a Zoom service, like many people are doing right now. You can listen to an audio podcast. You can browse around YouTube. You can participate in streaming events. You can watch TV shows from Mrs. Maisel to Fauda. Israeli TV is all over the place. There's all kinds of opportunities that are right at your fingertips. Day or night, anytime, any state of dress. To quote the modern Jewish sages, George and Ira Gershwin, who could ask for anything more? So I have a recommendation. We should not minimize the negatives. They are real. Anti-Semitism in America in 2023 is no joke. It's not something to dismiss blithely or not care about. We have a security committee at Kol Hadash that is talking about making changes to the building, writing up a manual of procedures. How do we handle a bomb threat? How do we handle a car bomb? How do we handle a active shooter drill? Do we practice evacuations? These are questions we have to ask realistically, because it is all too realistic a possibility of something we have to deal with. We are not taking this lightly. But no one gets on a sinking ship. No one stays on a sinking ship. What's even worse is if the ship isn't actually sinking. There are so many positive ways to think about the American Jewish experience in 2023. Let's remember to quote the American Jewish lyricist Harold Arlen and accentuate the positive. So I'm curious for your thoughts. What do you think? Is the American Jewish glass in 2023 half full or half empty? Is it leaking out or filling up?
Stand here. Something just as a question, because I don't know. Certainly anti-Semitic statements and activities are increasing, but so is pretty much everything. Anti-Black, anti-Hispanic, xenophobic, etc. Is the anti-Semitic stuff rising out of proportion to the overall rise of hate and nasty stuff? Or are we just part of the times?
I think it's a yes and. It's a rising tide lifts all boats. I think that anti-Semitic words and deeds have accelerated as they become more acceptable in different settings. I mean, you wouldn't have had the kind of speeches. There was a speech given at the City University of New York Law School graduation recently that was anti-Israel, which is, you know, within the political rights of what's possible, but sort of beyond the pale in terms of Israelis like killing Palestinian children and, you know, things that are really, really problematic. And that wouldn't have been done 10 years ago. On the other hand, there's stuff being said about the LGBTQ community that wasn't done many years ago. I mean, you saw how much things have shifted when Ron DeSantis, who's a candidate for the Republican nomination for president, takes things that Donald Trump himself said positively in support of or in defense of the LGBTQ community and makes it an attack ad against Trump for look at how bad he is on this issue, for saying nice things. And I was really struck by the response to that by the Log Cabin Republicans, which is a Republican group that defends LGBTQ individuals and themselves are gay and lesbian. They said, well, he can't differentiate between the common sense gays and the radical left gays. Because of course they see themselves as the common sense, moderate conservative gays versus those radical left gays. And I said, it reminds me of that joke that's made the rounds on the internet multiple times, where this woman says, I supported the leopards eating people's faces party, and I can't believe they ate my face. So they support a party that says all these terrible things about the LGBT. Maybe they figure, oh, it's just going to be about the T. Won't get to the L and the G. But in fact, when you support the leopard eating faces party, your face will eventually get eaten. So hopefully these groups who think they can slide by in a rising tide of hatred will realize they need to find common cause. But that also means, by the way, that the Jewish community needs to have somewhat open parameters for who they're willing to ally with. Because if we only want to ally with people who never say anything bad about Israel ever, then there's no common cause with just about anybody in the Muslim community who's also facing bigotry, and parts of the African American community who are also facing bigotry. So if we want to have them support us, we have to support them, and maybe both of us need to cut each other a little bit of slack on the margins to focus on the core danger.
Other speakers have touched on this, but there really is no officials running for office or trying to legislate in the anti-Semitic area. But you still have serious efforts against joining the crazies and the bullies against trans and gay people, and still blacks. Blacks are still being attacked, the right to vote. So there's a lot of communities and so somewhat minorities are still far worse off with official bigotry than you just don't see that against Jews any longer.
That's true. That's true. Those stories from the immigrants 100 years ago where the doors were closed and they were turned away and had to go to other countries, that's not the case for Jews today. We've been accepted into the white mainstream. We're in colleges, we're earning money, right? And we don't have gerrymandering affecting us the same way that it does some other minority communities.